Hey everyone, for this section number 3 in chapter 22, we're going to be talking about the unification of Italy. So, by the year 1800, Italy was in a very similar situation as Germany. There was not a unified nation called Italy. No such thing. In fact, Italy hadn't been unified since the Roman Empire collapsed more than 1,000 years earlier. Now, when we talk about Italian unification, let's first discuss why this disunity lasted so long. And we're going to do that by examining the obstacles to Italian unity. One of the biggest obstacles to Italian unity was local loyalties. Right? You look at the map here, and these show all the different regions that you have throughout Italy. Italians didn't see themselves as being Italian in, the 15, 16, 17, even early 1800s. They identified themselves by the region they were from. If you were from Venice up here, you said that you were Venetian. If you were from Naples down here, you were Neapolitan. And you could be even more specific. You were from Calabria or Puglia or so forth. If you were from Florence, you said that you were Tuscan, right, in here. So that's how you identified yourself, not as being Italian. It was similar to the city-state loyalties we learned about last year with ancient Greece. Now, because they had more loyalty to their region, there was often competition, and this often resulted in regional violence. Also, on top of the violence that you had between the regions, many areas of Italy were also under foreign control. You look on the map here, northern Italy was under Austrian control, the regions of Venice and Lombardy. Right, those were both under Austrian control. And this one down here, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, which was Naples and Sicily, that was actually under French control. And on top of it, the Papal States, they were basically doing their own thing. Right, so you had all sorts of different interests. You notice the one that is separate from it was this one here, Piedmont, Sardinia. Right, and that's the one we're going to be focusing on. And what really changed in the 1800s was similar to what we saw in Germany, was the rise of nationalism, right? And they were led by these nationalist leaders. So like in Germany, much of this resulted from Napoleon's invasions in the early 1800s. So, remember how we discussed back in chapter 18 how Napoleon's conquests in Europe sparked nationalistic movements throughout Europe? Well, Italy was no exception. This movement was led by leaders such as Giuseppe Mazzini. You see the quote there where he's talking about love for your country, about, this kind of, deep, burning love that you should have for your country. That's nationalism, right? And that kind of sums it up in a nutshell there. He formed what was called the Young Italy Society, and he called for a united Italian republic. He was a writer and he was an idealist, and he was very high-minded, and he inspired people to call for unity, but he was not a politician per se. Italy needed a practical politician to lead the way, similar how Bismarck did in Germany. This politician would be Camillo Cavour. Now, Cavour was the prime minister of Sardinia. Let's go back to our map. So you got the Kingdom of Two Sicilies down in the south. You've got the Austrian-controlled ones, but Piedmont and Sardinia, the island here of Sardinia, they formed kind of like a joint kingdom here. And similar how Prussia became the dominant German state in the unification movement, Sardinia was the dominant one for the Italian unification. It was a monarchy. It was a constitutional monarchy led by this guy, King Victor Emmanuel. We'll talk a little bit more about him in a second. But much in the way that Bismarck was the one behind the scenes making all the decisions, Prussia and later Germany, that's what Cavour was for Sardinia. He was the real kind of brains behind the operation and the main driving force for Italian unification. Also similar to Bismarck, Cavour believed in practical solutions, right? And what did we call this with Bismarck? Realpolitik. He used policies to strengthen Sardinia's economy, make it the strongest that it was in the region. And he also made alliances with key countries. An example is an alliance he made with France against Austria. And this resulted in Piedmont, Sardinia annexing this region here, Lombardy. So this was the first region to now become a part of this joint kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia, which we'll really just refer to as Sardinia. All right, it just makes things easier. But this would be the first one, Lombardy. But they did it with French support. So these, kind of knowing how to create these political alliance was going a long way for Cavour. A third nationalist leader was Giuseppe Garibaldi. Now, he was from southern Italy, the kingdom of the two Sicilies. You remember that from the previous maps. And he made an alliance with Cavour with his red shirt army. Now you see him wearing the red shirt. Obviously, that was their kind of unofficial uniform. And Cavour gave the red shirts weapons. All right, that's important to remember. And he thought that the red shirts could kind of come literally from a different direction. They used these weapons to invade Sicily from the south. Here, let me show you guys the map first, and then I'll kind of come back to the points here. All right, so you see how the arrow starts up in Piedmont and then makes its way down to Sicily. So Garibaldi and Cavour, so we'll say G plus C plus G happens up here, right? That's where they make their alliance. And then using the guns and weapons that Cavour supplies from, Garibaldi travels down to Sicily and then invades from the south, picking up support as he goes until eventually he arrives here in Naples. Now, while he was working his way up and winning these battles, he did this very quickly, and this rapid success, it actually made Cavour kind of nervous. He was worried that Garibaldi would just decide to take power in the kingdom of the two Sicilies and try and rule southern Italy. But in a very patriotic move, now we'll get back to this last point, Garibaldi decided to unite with Sardinia, right? So here at Naples, you see how the green arrow is coming in. That's because Cavour wanted the Sardinian army to move against Garibaldi just in case he decided not to play along with his plan. But Garibaldi said, no, this is our moment of unity to all be on the same page. So they shook hands, they united, and he actually stepped down from power. And so with Garibaldi supporting Sardinia, the new leader of Italy now became that guy that I mentioned before, King Victor Emmanuel of Sardinia. Kind of cut off a little bit the A there, but you guys get the idea. And he is proclaimed king of a united Italy. Now, two areas remained outside of their control, and that would be Rome and Venice. But this would not last for very long. Let me guys show you a map that's a little bit easier to read also. And also erase the marks. Okay, so this color codes it. You can see the Kingdom of Sardinia is in the dark purple there. Added to Sardinia between 1859 and 1860. 1859 was the first one here of Lombardy. And then 1860, with Garibaldi's help, you've got Sicily and then the Kingdom of the two Sicilies down here, eventually up, including the other papal states as they march down to meet Garibaldi and Naples. So the two areas that are outside of their control, Venetia, that's Venice, that would be added in 1866. That would basically be taken from them from the Austrian Empire up here. And then Rome, the last one, because that was ruled by the Pope, that finally gets on board in 1870. So for the first time since 476, when the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the entire Italian peninsula was under a united government. Now, while this was clearly a time for rejoicing, it soon became apparent that there were many challenges for the new nation. The new government had a tough road ahead. Italy had no tradition of unity, and getting all people on board was going to be a challenge. Now, some of these challenges were the regional differences like we talked about before. All right, here are your regions, and you also notice that they're dialects. They all spoke Italian, but they were different versions of Italian. If you were down here speaking Calabresian dialect, you would have a difficult time understanding somebody from Venice or Lombardo Milanese. Right? Would the basics of it be the same? Yeah, but it goes beyond even just, say, like a southern accent. The way that you pronounce things, the way that you phrased your sentences would be different. So that makes a tough challenge for unity when people are almost like speaking different languages. Plus, on top of it, these regions up here, the north, historically, they were richer. That was where you had your cities, even going back to medieval times, where you had your wealthy cities of art and trade in the Renaissance. The south down here, that was rural, that was countryside. They were poor farmers down there. So these regional divisions were going to be tough. Plus, on top of it, you had the Pope to deal with. Right? You had Pope Pius IX at this time. The Pope resisted being the subject of a national government. He had never had to do that before. And I'm not just talking about this specific Pope. No Pope had been subject to a national government since Rome fell. They'd always been, in essence, their own king of their own kingdom. And he urged Catholics, which was pretty much all Italians, to not follow this new government. So that was creating all sorts of problems. You also had political unrest. Protests against the government increased, and people started turning to more extreme views, such as socialism, which we've talked about a lot in the past, and also another one called anarchism, right? Anarchists are people that view all government as, kind of illegal and immoral, and they feel that it should be eliminated. They often resort to violence, and this belief became increasingly popular among Italians in the late 1800s. One other challenge that the new government faced was growing emigration, or the moving away of Italians from their homelands. The early 1900s saw a rapid population increase, and many Italians struggled to find work or support their families. This led many to look elsewhere for opportunities, so they got on boats and they headed to other places, most notably the United States. This is when you see the first mass waves of Italian immigrants coming into the United States in the late 18 and early 1900s. All right, so even though that they were still facing some problems, Italy was now a united country, and that wraps things up for Italian unification, and we will go in the next and final section of the chapter talk about some issues going on in Russia at this time.